Dr. Jameel Ahmad Khan, who's a former ambassador. Jameel Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Jameel Saab, we understand politics, we understand international affairs. As far as Pakistan's foreign policy is concerned, the current government has been taking a very neutral stance, but an independent foreign policy stance. Is that one of the reasons why Pakistan is not being favored as a country within the international bodies, especially when it concerns the West?
No, I think once we talk about the international bodies, then there are several countries in it, and more importantly, those countries with whom we have our geopolitical interest, those countries with whom we have the geoeconomic interest, those countries with whom we have the trade. So those countries automatically becomes important. And in this case, obviously, the European Union, the America and its allies, the other countries, they with whom we are having trade, and we've been having always a bilateral relation with all these countries. There have been some kind of hiccups at some times during our entire relation with U.S. in particular, but by far we've been having a very engaging relations with U.S. Having said so, that the foreign policy, independent foreign policy, obviously it's our right, and that's what our Qaid, that's what Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah had stipulated, right, in the first very foreign policy, that we have a neutral stance. We will propel the causes of the Muslim world, and we will have friendship with all the countries, and particularly neighboring countries. These are the three cardinal points which our Qaid had given to us right from the very beginning. Now, to what extent we've been able to practice that, well, most of the time we have tried, but the problem with any country is that you are as strong as your economy, you are as strong outside as you are strong in your own country. So one has to have a full strength in one's own country, and that is how your foreign policy, and those who really implement that foreign policy, they feel much more stronger to implement those foreign policies. So having these couple of points in mind, now if we see whether we are being pressurized or whether we've been able to maintain this neutral stance or maintain this independent foreign policy, I would say that yes, we've been having pressures from time to time, may it be FATF, may it be IMF, may it be European Union, but we've been sustaining that pressure, and by far we've been telling them that we try to have friendship. People keep giving example of China. Yes, China is our all-weather friend. Everyone knows we have without any problem, we maintained our relation with China. But at the same time, we never humiliate ourselves, never claim that we're not to have relations at the cost of a relation with China or someone else. So for the bottom line of the answer to your question is that we try to the extent it's possible that we have tried to have a different policy, and to the extent it's feasible to us. At times, if we may not spell it out physically, but at times we've been having a huge factor because of our dependence on trade and dependence on our debt servicing, our dependence upon the loan which we've been taking. So all those drawbacks we have been having once we felt the pressure of it, although publicly we have not really, and we don't really spell it out. There have been pressure. Once we announced our Kuala Lumpur summit, I am an independent person, so I can throw some light on it. There have been pressure. Once we tried our pipeline from Iran, although it was a sanction, but the same sanction was not applied on India on various aspects once they were doing trade. So yes, there are pressures, but we've been able to sustain it. We've been able to sustain even the sanctions of our friends. Some of the friends who were friends, and later on they imposed sanctions on us. So all these journey of ours in the foreign policy, yes, we have seen lots of ups and downs.
All right, Ambassador Jamil, I'd also like to refer to something that the Prime Minister Imran Khan said today while talking at the Islamabad security dialogue. He said a country which does not have inclusive prosperity will always remain insecure. Do you feel what would you like to comment as far as that is concerned? How important is it for countries like Pakistan to stand up on their own, to have an inclusive foreign policy, to have a foreign policy that is independent of pressures by any group whatsoever across the world? And for that to be achieved, what needs to be done by Pakistan on different levels, in your point of view?
Right, as I was describing to you earlier, that we have to be very strong within ourselves, within our own country. May it be economy, may it be our socio-economic condition, may it be our political situation, may it be our geopolitical instance on various foreign policy matters. So, but more importantly, it's our own economy. We are totally cognizant of the fact that we have an internal and external debt which has piled up for the last about 3 decades and even more. And those debts have really now gone to the level that we have started depending on IMF so much, and we have started depending on World Bank, and we have started depending and expecting that the FATF should not really take a step which could be detrimental to our interest. So despite the fact that we've been complying in so many things, but because of the geopolitical situation of the world, there are countries they have been trying to take those forums as a leverage and try to assert some pressure on us. So far, it's all right, but what Prime Minister said is totally right. And we are so much, unless we are stable economically in our own country, unless we are stable from other perspective in our own country, it becomes very difficult for any country for that matter, including Pakistan, to dispel all the practical research, because they are always a cost or all the consequences. Listening to some of the speech countries was on us, they like those handicaps when Prime Minister was writing it. Yeah.
All right, Ambassador Jamil Saab, also in the past, if you see Pakistan's history, Pakistan has been told or forced to take sides at one point or the other in its history. In the past, if you look at the past, it has also borne the brunt of the wars against terror as a result of 9/11, and of course huge influx of migrants from Afghanistan into our country. Pakistan has done all that, and a lot of sacrifices have been made in Pakistan, whether it be of our civilians or whether it be of our armed forces. What, in your point of view, needs to be done now by Pakistan as far as its foreign policy or its relationship with all different countries across the world is concerned? If you look at the recent past, this is what the government has been doing, try to create some sort of balance between the different powers that be, the different factions that be, whether it be going to Russia, whether it be talking to Ukraine at the same time, whether it be also involving the West, whether it be also talking to China at the same time. How do you feel Pakistan can move ahead without creating an imbalance as far as this foreign policy is concerned? And then I, of course, will refer to the demarche that has been sent by the National Security Committee. But before that, I'd like your point of view on that.
Right. The country, with whatever move they make in terms of their relations or in terms of their activities which could affect the other international community, they are definitely viewed and they are definitely brought in the spotlight. And the countries, they start calculating, the other countries, they start calculating their interest. Now, once I've said so, for example, if we are taking so much of interest in the CPEC, rightly so in our own interest, in our national interest, then some of the countries, particularly those who want to have the containment of China, chiefly the United States, they obviously they would not openly say so, but they would try and do the overture of the kind where Pakistan should try, or Pakistan is not able to be so proactive in in such initiatives. The other one was Russian thing, and that was consultative process, as the Prime Minister was saying. There could be debate among our own diplomatic community. We had a debate, and the perception which was created, and I'll tell you how that perception could be dispelled. First of all, we should have had enough acumen. I'll be advise the Prime Minister for that visit. And I also understand that once you have decided a visit at a such a high power visit, Prime Minister level, and that too after about 2-3 decades, it becomes very difficult to cancel it. But at the same time, if the country is at war, where we are going to visit, then there could be some excuse too. Now, I'm sure the pros and cons must have been weighed at the time when the Prime Minister left, and that has been made as a sore point. There could have been neutralized quite well if all our missions all around the country would have been able to project through the public diplomacy, through the traditional diplomacy, that's why it was so important for us not to cancel this visit of Prime Minister. The third thing is that we have our relations, and we have our relations with so many countries. Those countries among themselves may not be having a very good relation, but we are maintaining those relations, and we had a very cogent ground because we have been having our best of the best relations with Ukraine, and we have improved the relations with Russia too. Ukraine, we've been having our military industry, our defense industry, that's known as DEPO. We've been really buying a lot of things. We've been collaborating with Ukraine. We've been importing food grains, particularly wheat and rations for the last 12 years. Our trajectory is about now almost $800 million trade we are having with Russia from almost zero. So that's how we had to really strike that balance. Bottom line is that all our missions abroad should have been in a position to public diplomacy, through the traditional diplomacy, to convince particularly those countries who were perturbed about that is European Union and the United States.
All right, Ambassador Jameel Khan, kindly stay online with us. And I'd refer the same questions, the last two questions that I asked Kamran, to you, Ambassador Jameel. I'd like a very short answer to your point of view on these comments by the National Security Committee.
Well, National Security Committee was very cautious in making their comments, and it's true that, first of all, what is this communication? Now, this communication, as Kamran was also mentioning, that it's totally a privileged communication. It comes under Official Secret Act, and it's only for the eyes of three particular persons, President, Prime Minister, the Foreign Office, and if the Foreign Office feels that there is some other entity which is to be shown some of the contents, they do that. So anything, because while I was ambassador, we've been writing, each ambassador, have been writing, giving their own assessment about the country, about the political aspects, about their interaction with those host country officials. And if those contents are brought to limelight, then the country's relations could definitely be affected. So I would tend to agree with those analysts who would say that yes, politics should not be brought into the foreign policy, because that could really be detrimental to our national interest and detrimental to our long-term foreign policy. Now, having said so, any official, first of all, the Nick Price, who is the spokesperson in White House, he has denied that any of the officials, it has not been issued by any official from the State Department. That's true, because that was just a normal conversation, and those conversation was interpreted, and the notes were taken by our ambassador there, and accordingly that cable basically are what we call telegram, which is a crypto message, which is basically a coded message which comes to the respective countries, that in our case our Foreign Office, and then accordingly there are the only three head of the institutions. They are privileged to see that and to give their advice on it according to their leadership wisdom and the foreign policy. So that's one aspect. And then obviously none of the country would, once it comes to limelight, none of the country would like to tolerate that once it goes to the level that...
I understand. Ambassador Jamil Khan Sahab, I'm really sorry we're a bit short of time. Thank you very much to have joined us and to have talked to us about this demarche that was handed over to the acting envoy of a country that had, from whom we received a memo that was forced the National Security Committee to convene a meeting on it because of the content.